clicker here. Hi everyone, my name is Bryan Burd. I'm with Chemular. It sounds like the thing to do is say something from Chris Greer's speech that you thought was cool and make it part of your speech. So one thing I saw Chris say earlier was anyone that tries to predict what the FDA is going to do is full of crap or something like that. So great tip of wisdom there, Chris. And I also don't want to forget Mike Bond. I remember everything from Mike Bond's speech. He said something like 250% of people remember 5% of what he said in the first hour or something. So
you remember that much?
I remembered that, yeah. So today I'm going to talk about the practical challenges that the FDA faces and the implications. And what I'm hoping is that some of the challenges that they're having, you may see as opportunities. Before we get into that, I think the most, there we go. I didn't want to have a Henry moment. The first slide I like to say on every presentation, everything we write, is this one about the CDC. So on the CDC's website, it's data from 2014, although they present it as current, is that 480,000 people die annually from cigarettes or cigarette-related diseases. And when you think of, so almost 500,000 people, and when you think of things that the government might do if 500,000 people are dying every year, COVID comes to mind. And they've shut down the economy, they ruin people's lives and close businesses for 500,000 people for COVID, but this happens year after year with cigarettes or cigarette-related causes. So I think that's a key piece to present every time we're talking about ends products and harm reduction, and a challenge for the FDA that they're trying to get down this massive loss of life. And also, to Chris's point earlier, it's the products that companies out there, manufacturers make, they're saving lives. So before I get into a couple of the areas where the FDA is going to have problems or has challenges, I just want to make sure, go through a few of the key players that'll come up. So the FDA, of course, is a key player. They got tasked with regulating the tobacco industry, a little different than their other products, which, as you know, they're safe and effective, and this has a new criteria, which is appropriate for the protection of public health. And there's talk about moving the CTP out of the FDA. Just talk, but something to keep in mind of. So the industry itself is a major player here, and you've got all kinds of different companies. You've got big tobacco, like we saw with Imperial up here. You've got small companies. You've got companies that are into regulation and trying to do the right thing, and then others that are trying to stay under the radar. So it's hard to paint the industry by a single brush, but a major player there. Lawmakers play a big piece in how the decisions are made, and it also points to how difficult it is to predict what this industry is going to do, because there's so many forces involved that can change the direction of how the laws get made and how things get passed. As an example, with the lawmakers, there was 2021, I believe, Janet Woodcock went up in front of Congress, got grilled in front of Congress, and then a month later, you see lots of MDOs issued, and the FDA had this major switcheroo. So any one of these players on this list can change the direction of the industry. Tobacco control groups also play a major part of this. And it seems to me, and I've been involved not long, maybe 2015 in this industry, But it seems to me that most regulatory agencies at the federal government are fairly balanced. They take the industry's opinion in mind, as well as the advocacy groups and the regulatory groups to make the regulation. And so this industry is out of balance. And it feels like the 2018 National Youth Tobacco Survey really had a lot to do with that. But it feels very skewed towards these tobacco control groups. I was at a conference, the next one is state tax. I was at a conference and a gentleman got up and said, states can't afford for tobacco companies to go out of business because they need that money. And without tobacco revenue, you'd see a lot of programs and state issues coming that would fail. So I think that part's important too, to know that state taxes, and they play a big role. And the last two I put on here, healthcare companies, they stand they're part of the solution, but could also be part of the problem, as well as the illicit market. One last thing I wanted to do before I get into the challenges of the FDA, and those challenges we're going to talk about are mainly around applications that they have, which I think you'll also see the opportunities there, as well as enforcement. But the big thing that I see that the FDA has a problem with is they don't trust industry. And industry has proven itself in the past to be untrustworthy. But as of today, there really is no trust that I see from the FDA to industry. And I also see that the FDA has not gained the trust of industry. So it goes both ways. I have also need a little water. Let me grab this right here. Okay, much better. So before I get into the applications and the enforcement stuff, I just want to set the stage with three major dates. So if you look at the September 9th, 2020 deadline, and I'm going to call that bucket one. So this was a deadline for all applications that were products that were not grandfathered, and they were they were on the market prior to 2016. If they got their application in by September 9, 2020, they'd be allowed to stay in the market for an extra year. So I'm going to call those bucket one. Bucket two, I'm going to call all applications that were synthetically derived, using synthetically derived nicotine, that were submitted by May 14th, 2022. And then for bucket three, that's going to be all tobacco-derived applications that were after September 9th and all applications that were after May 14th. So the applications that were received, and this is one of the major challenges by the FDA, and they state it very often, is that they've received over 26 million applications. So if you go on the FDA website, you can see what the status is of all those applications. Now, my understanding is the FDA has several teams. Maybe it's 5 teams, maybe it's 10 teams that are reviewing these applications at a time. And they put out that they take thousands of hours to review each application. So if it's thousands of hours and you've got 5 teams working on these, you're going to have 15, 20 years worth of applications to go through. This is what I believe is to be the FDA's #1 challenge, is there's no way for them to review all these applications that they're getting. And that was just, if you look at the numbers, bucket 1. When you add in bucket 2 and now bucket 3, it's insane how many applications they're going to have to review. Oh, there's the website at the bottom there. They got more than they anticipated. The ones that they denied, they then had a bunch of legal challenges on, so they couldn't just deny them and move on. So that's slowed them up. As I said, they got another round with non-tobacco nicotines, and then there's all these bucket 3 applications. The interesting thing is, for people that submitted an application in bucket 1, by law, they should have come off the market after 1 year. But the FDA has not kicked them all off. For people that submitted applications in bucket 2, they were given 90 days. So they should have come off the market by July 13th. And the FDA didn't kick them off. If you look at what the FDA said, if you look at warning letters and information they've given you, anyone, with the exception of one company that I know about, I've never seen any warning letter or negative action for companies that had active applications, whether they're bucket 1, bucket 2, or bucket 3. The other major challenge the FDA has is enforcement. So the FDA is good at finding people that they know already exists. And they have a very difficult time finding companies that they don't know exist. So as an example, I like to call this my numerator theory. So if you look at a fraction and all the people that they can go and find, you've got a numerator and a denominator in a fraction. So if there's 100 companies on the market and they go and investigate 20 companies, that's your 20 is your numerator, 100 is your denominator. The FDA only knows the numerator. They don't know how many companies are in this market. And the only way they've been able to find them is if those companies in 2016 and 2017 went on the registration database and put their name in, if they did their ingredient listings, if they filed a PMTA, if they're part of an action taken by a warning letter. These are the only way, these are the main ways that companies are found by the FDA. And now there's websites out there. So, and they're getting smarter. So they've gone out and they've got websites where you can make an anonymous tip against a competitor. But they have a very difficult time finding you. Warning letters have also been a sore spot for the FDA, big challenge. And again, getting better at it. But September 11th of this year, Chuck Schumer posted an announcement that there was 685 warning letters issued, and only 10% of them had been closed out. And this was since 2021. So for that 2-year period, meaning that 90% of them, the companies ignored, didn't follow up, and they were still open. So the enforcement side, through the warning letters, the FDA is not doing a good job. They don't work well with other agencies. It's hard for them to share their lists. They're trying to get Customs and Border Enforcement to lock down the ports and not let products in. You see state agencies that are taking it upon themselves to regulate these products. You've got Louisiana, Alabama, Oklahoma, that they've got these vape directory lists. which again, they don't have access to PMTAs and other parts that the federal government has. So it's that part's always a big challenge for the FDA. And then you've got issues with these alternative sources where it started out with synthetic nicotine, where companies said that you can't come inside our facility, we're not using nicotine, and then it got added to the deeming rule. That was back in 2022, and now you've got issues with other products that aren't nicotine products that they have no jurisdiction over, which is a problem for the FDA. So, in the spirit of making some predictions, my prediction for the next couple years is the FDA is going to stay laser focused on not making decisions in favor of tobacco and appeasing the anti-tobacco groups. I think they'll stick to this plan of zero youth usage. I think they will continue to take actions that end up punishing U.S. manufacturers at the benefit of foreign manufacturers. An example of which, the 2020 enforcement guidance, where they banned flavored pods, which are mainly U.S. companies, and you see this massive rise in disposables. And I think they'll also be inadvertently responsible for this rapid growth in the illicit trade. If I were running the FDA, I would do some rebalancing of decision making, try to make decisions more in favor of tobacco, the tobacco industry. I would also try to define success. What I see the FDA not doing today is they don't say anything positive about the industry. So if there's ever they don't want to be seen as giving the industry and increasing any tobacco usage. So if you look at these deaths, 480,000 deaths, put out a metric. Let's try to reduce this by 10% a year. And if they hit that goal, then announce it and pat yourself on the back. That would be my second thing I would change. The third thing would be try to rebuild trust with the industry. If you look at other regulated bodies that work well, and I would say banking does a pretty good job, the food industry, you've got industry, the drug and device is another good example. You've got companies that are following the rules without being told to follow the rules and not having someone oversee them, where this industry doesn't have that trust that I see with the FDA to do that. And then the last thing is focus more on harm reduction, where you've got 500,000 people dying from cigarettes every year, you've got much safer alternatives, and it feels like they're heading in that direction, 2016, 2017, but they moved away from it. Okay, I do have, my next slide is for questions, and I think I can look at here. Is that the best way, Jason? Okay. If someone has a question, is that what you're saying?
Anybody have any questions for Bryan?
Oh, I'm right in the light. That feels like a no. Oh, yes. Gay, what do you got?
Hi, Bryan. It's nice to meet you personally.
Yeah.
You know, Lillian spoke earlier about amendments and what your amendment strategy. And I'd just like to hear more about that. You know, our company filed by September 9, and while I've been monitoring your and TPE's assistance, what's going on in my field. So there's one question about filing amendments so that the advice was
Yep. So if the people in the back, the question was about the amendment strategy. And so earlier on, there was a panel question where someone asked about application, I forget the fancy word, it was like rollover application or something, which I felt meant put an application in, get it, if it gets denied, put another one in, if it gets denied, put another one, if it gets denied, keep doing that. Utilizing this strategy that the FDA is not enforcing it against companies that have active applications. But how the question got answered was amendments. And so the PMTA guidance allows for you to continue to strengthen your application through amendments. And so it feels like the synthetic applications, which the FDA only gave companies 60 days to submit, it would be impossible to have all the science to meet all the guidance from the FDA. So what many companies done, and ours included, was to suggest that you roll in, you submit a basic application, and then you let the FDA know that you're going to be hitting these milestones and putting in the science as it comes through. The unknown part, or maybe the belief, is it might have a couple effects on your application. So in one of the TPL reviews, so these technical product lead reviews for a company, they mentioned that the company had a lot of amendments, and they felt that was a negative. And it was something, I want to say at least 9 amendments as part of this TPL. So maybe that has an effect. Maybe you shouldn't do too many amendments, but you want to get the information in. We also had, there is some talk that, and the FDA's released, if you submit a major amendment, that's going to put you at the back of the line and reset your clock. So part of the PMTA review process, the FDA stated that they're only going to give you 180 days to review your application, which they've never hit. It's a big joke. But if you think that if your plan is stay in this constant review process, well then maybe you can submit a major amendment every 5 or 6 months that then puts you at the back of the line. So I don't know if that answered your question, Gabe, but it feels like it's different for every company. Some companies want to get through this. They need to get their science in, but they didn't have time to do it. And so then you can do your amendments that way. Other companies are looking to just stay on the market and see how the FDA, how things, it's very unpredictable. It's hard to invest in. I heard that a few times. That's absolutely right. And it's a very unpredictable situation. Yep.
With respect, though, to sort of evolving standards, I think that's really my specific question. As they seem to articulate new standards, flavor switching, randomized rate, so can you speak specifically to amendments to address those issues?
Sure. So in 2021, July, I mentioned Janet Woodcock went in front of Congress. They grilled her. They said, you got to do something about this vaping industry. And out of that came this new standard that you need to show that your flavored products have an additional benefit over your tobacco flavors, and those benefits outweigh the risk to youth. So then they kept repeating it over and over again, and they feel like that's a new standard. So that wasn't part of the 2016 guidance, it wasn't part of the 2019 final rule, but now it's a new standard that everyone has to uphold. So you've got 2 choices. So you can try to stick to the legal route and say, you didn't tell us this, and this violates the APA and the Fair Notice Act, and if you've seen some companies have success with that. mainly the Fifth Circuit, a little bit in the 11th Circuit. Other companies have not had success with that, and there's other companies still that have chosen just to do the study and put that in. So what we've seen some bite from the FDA is if you're going to do the study, and a study like that may take you a year to do, is let them know that you're going to do it and tell them, this is our plan, here's our protocol, we're going to start this day, we'll have results for you in 1 year. And we've seen, in some cases, some slight benefit for giving some advance notice. All right, Kay.
Any more questions? I'll bring the mic. Oh, come on, shill.
Kevin Burd with Chemular. Thought I would offer one up, try and grill my brother. I don't get the opportunity often. Well, at least not for the last 30 years. So I just see year after year of enforcement, non-enforcement. Let's call it non-enforcement. And you see bucket 1, non-enforcement, bucket 2, non-enforcement, bucket 3, non-enforcement. And we could keep making more buckets, let's just say. How and when does it end? What would be, and not only that, do you have any idea what some of those warning signs might be that we're getting close to seeing the end? Because if I'm the FDA, I have no idea. Now I've got this out of control growth. It's growing, it's growing. How do they put a stake in the sand? I guess legally or whatever, what can they do? How does this ever end? Or at least, if we don't know that, maybe we at least know what are some of the signs we would look for in the market or within Congress or something. Yeah.
Yep. So my initial plan was to kind of build a little framework, which with the people I mentioned earlier, the stakeholders and the players involved, the FDA, these anti-tobacco groups, Congress, they each have, they're all putting out breadcrumbs. And it's difficult to follow the breadcrumbs, but if you put enough together, you can make up a story of what's going on. So what I like to look at is, I like to look at the warning letters very regularly. So the FDA publishes all these. You can read through how they're changing, who they're sending the warning letters to. It makes a difference. Is this out to a distributor? Is it out to a retailer? Have they changed the language on what's in the warning letter? So checking the warning letters are going to give you a good clue about how they're enforcing against different companies. The FDA also has a Twitter page. So if you go, I think it's CTP Tobacco is the Twitter handle. They're putting out notices very regularly, and it will definitely give you an idea of what they're looking at and what their mindset is, and foreshadow some of their conclusions. In October of this year, the FDA did an in-person series and laid out all the things that they're planning to do for filing reviews and what the new standards are. And when you go back and look at all the FDA communication, you can find their actions don't necessarily come out of nowhere. They're very, they're not trying to be sneaky, and so they're putting out the information. So you just got to listen to them, I guess, would be one thing where you could find that information. Some things other, like a little more inside baseball stuff that we do, we'll go to the usajobs.com, and it'll tell you, you can look up CTP and see where they're hiring people. You can see that this year they plan to hire dozens of epidemiologists and behavioral scientists, which is going to tell you that they're pivoting to need more people to analyze these studies. So the information is there, but you got to kind of dig through, and you can see where they're heading based on that information.
Thanks, Brian. You guys, in case we didn't mention it, Brian's our Chief Operating Officer at Chemular, and he oversees every single PMTA application that we submit. So we've submitted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, and his fingerprints are all over them. So he knows what he's talking about. He's got deep inside baseball knowledge. So now's the time to ask him a free question. Any more questions before we take off for the evening?
Yes, Gay.
Let me get you the mic so everyone can hear you.
Thank you. I came with a list. No, only one more. It relates to sort of queue jumping
Yep.
and priority and what a product of merit really is, short of age gating a can.
Yeah, fantastic question. So FDA had these deadlines. The September 9th deadline, they received millions of applications, and then more than what they anticipated. And so they had a list of who they're going to prioritize. And so they listed them out. Companies that had the highest market share would be in their top priority list, and then they randomly selected a few others. They further committed to that with this Judge Grimm case, and which also has now forced them to put out these statistics from the website I showed you. That is going to be, through FOIA requests, but also in this October meeting, they had these queues. They had a Q1, a Q2, and a Q3. So everyone that I just mentioned is in this Q1. So you've got, I think the list there was 100,000 applications, currently still on the end side. Back a couple more. Yeah, so now it may only be 1,200 applications, 1,200,000 applications. It may only be 300 or 400 companies, but it's so there's a handful of those that are in this Q1. Then Q2 is going to be everyone else. So that's these 1,200,000 products. And if you submit an application today, you're going to get in that Q2 line. And if you submitted your tobacco-derived application, so your Q1, and bucket 1, and you submitted a synthetic application, bucket 2, that's another challenge for the FDA. Who do you go first? Do you do the older one first? Do you do the new one first? You want to get synthetic off the market? It's all a problem. So these are the two main queues, review queues, 1 and 2. Now they've also mentioned they've got a third queue, which is, we dub it like a product of merit. So if you can demonstrate to the FDA that your product should get ahead of everyone in the review queue for some reason. Maybe you've got a very low nicotine level. Maybe you've got some kind of technology like age gating that blocks youth from using your product. You can have a meeting with the FDA and try to skip the line and get your application reviewed ahead of everyone. But it's not like a box that you check on your amendment or application to say, hey, move us to the front of the line, we're important. You've got to get yourself in front of the FDA, typically with a meeting, to do that.